Luka Dončić may be the NBA's most terrifying offensive weapon, but one brutal warning has rocked the Lakers. Can this superstar actually lead Los Angeles to a championship? Or will his own habits destroy their title dream?
Do you trust Luka, Jay Will, as Brian Windhorst is back here with us on First Take, do you trust him to lead a championship team?
No, I think Luka is one of the most talented players I've ever seen in the history of the game, but I think he has losing habits. I think he has bad habits. And there are two interesting factors that I think really play into his impact on the game is not aligned with the statistical output, right? You see the crazy numbers, but I don't know if it impacts winning. Number one of that is, right, he leads the NBA in turnovers per game. The Lakers are one of the worst transition defenses in the league, so that impacts that aspect of it because they're not good at that. Secondly, was a stat that I saw online that really blew my mind. So, 13 players in the NBA this season who have played in at least 30 games and who have a usage rate of over 30. Where do you think Luka is of those 13 players in the NBA this season?
Last.
He's tied for last with Kawhi Leonard. With Kawhi Leonard. An impact, and this is in team offensive rating, Stephen A. Team offensive rating for the 13 players in at least 30 games who have a usage rate of over 30. He's tied for last. So with those two things, and you watch a guy like Giannis, who had less than him, his offensive rating is better. Steph, offensive team rating is better. Cade Cunningham, team offensive rating, better. I can keep going down the list of the teams where their team offensive rating is better. So at some point, when you see him every single play, screaming at the refs, yelling at the refs, not even getting back in the frame defensively, I know a lot of the talk is going to be about LeBron. A lot going to be talk is how they can play together. But at some point, I think he's one of the most talented players. I just don't know if he's the leader that people are projecting him to be that actually match his statistical output.
And a first-round pick. So that's it. So now, having said that, let me say this. You're not wrong with what you're saying about Luka Dončić, but you don't teach the skill set that he brings to the table. He's the NBA's leading scorer. Yes, he's leading in turnovers per game as well. He's also number one in usage rate. The real issue with Luka, you can overcome all of that stuff and figure it out if that man plays some defense. The fact that he can't stop a cold is the real problem. The fact that he doesn't give it to you nearly as much on the defensive end of the floor than he does on the offensive end of the floor is the real issue. Because we've seen, even with the great Kobe Bryant, there have been times where people was like, kid is hungry. He was thirsty, rather. He wants the ball. He's going to jack up shots. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And they would say, well, it's ill-advised. It's not the way to go, et cetera, et cetera. You heard some of these things. But what you couldn't question was the devotion and the relentless effort that he put forth on both ends of the floor to try to make up for whatever potential deficiencies he may have had elsewhere. And that's what you're not getting from Luka. So I get where you're coming from. I understand it. And I think that when you talk about lead, the operative word here is lead a championship team. That's part of leading. And that's what he's lacking.
I think that he can, guys, because I've seen the Mavericks come pretty close. But I will say this, you're going to have the right team around him. And that means you're going to have three-point shooting, which the Lakers don't have. If you go back and look, the year that the Mavericks went to the finals a couple years ago, they were third in the league in three-pointers made. The Lakers are 23rd, okay? And you are going to have protection for him defensively, just like the Warriors, bless you, just like the Warriors had protection defensively for Steph. They had a great defensive team outside of him. They were routinely in the top 5 defensively. Yeah. Exactly. So it can be done. Now, I agree. As you guys know, I've gone quite viral for ripping Luka for his allowing himself to be taken out of games, basically by fouling out or being ejected from highly important games in his life. And he has absolutely got to get past that. There's no doubt about that. He can't be in a hugely important game in the finals where you're fighting for your team's championship life and you be out of the game because you've been ejected or you've fouled out because your effort is not acceptable. He's obviously got to get past that. But do I believe he can do it? Absolutely. This guy's talent level is incredible. And I absolutely agree with everything that Nico was concerned about, Jay. Of course, his conditioning, and you're going to give him $300 million is a concern. I agree that there was really big concerns. What I don't agree on is giving up on him. And so I absolutely think he can do it. Will he do it? We're going to watch and find out.
He's just been a pro since he's been 13 years old. So, yes, we talk about at this early stage of his career, but a lot of these habits are defined. Like a lot of these habits. And Wendy, I kind of agree with you if you put the right pieces around him. All I'm saying is what we're watching now is the ball dies in his hands. He doesn't have a high motor. And there's a lot of complaining each and every possession where it takes him out of the play defensively. Like, Stephen A., you talk about him not being a good defender. He ain't even clip half the damn plays. He's not even on the defensive side of the court. He's still in the one-on-one love fest yelling at the refs. So when we think about leading, I don't question his offensive skill set at all. Wendy, I would agree with you. I think his ceiling is probably the highest out of any player in the league. I just don't know sometimes if the right mental fortitude is there to achieve who we want him to be.
Luka Dončić may be one of the most unstoppable offensive players in basketball, but a brutal question is now hanging over the Lakers. Can Luka actually lead Los Angeles to a championship? On First Take, Jay Will was asked directly if he trusted Luka to lead a championship team.
His answer was simple. No. The reason wasn't Luka's talent. Nobody doubts that.
The concern is that Luka has developed losing habits, turnovers, defensive lapses, constant frustration with officials, and possessions where his offensive brilliance doesn't translate into winning basketball.
And that is a terrifying problem for a Lakers team built around him. But the criticism becomes much more serious when the numbers enter the conversation. Luka's offensive production is ridiculous. He led the NBA in scoring at 33.5 points per game, while also producing 7.7 rebounds and 8.3 assists. His usage rate was around 38%, meaning the Lakers' offense depended on him constantly. But there is a darker number. Luka also averaged roughly 4 turnovers per game, leading the league in that category as well. So the question isn't whether Luka produces. He absolutely does. The question is whether that enormous statistical production is creating the same level of winning impact. Because when one superstar controls the ball on almost every possession, every mistake becomes more expensive. A turnover doesn't simply become a turnover. It can become a transition basket. And for a Lakers team that has struggled defending in transition, that can create a devastating chain reaction. And that leads directly to the biggest criticism of all, what Luka gives the Lakers when he doesn't have the ball. Nobody is asking Luka to stop being Luka. Nobody expects him to suddenly become the greatest defensive player in the NBA. But there is a basic expectation for a franchise superstar. When the possession ends, get back and defend. And that is where the criticism becomes brutal. Luka can spend valuable seconds arguing with referees while the game is already moving in the opposite direction. One complaint becomes another. One missed call becomes frustration. And suddenly, Luka isn't even part of the defensive possession. That is not simply a basketball problem. That's a leadership problem. Because when you're asking teammates to sacrifice everything for a championship, the superstar has to set that standard first. The Kobe Bryant comparison makes this even more interesting. Kobe could force shots. He could make mistakes. He could take difficult attempts. But nobody questioned his relentless effort. He competed on both ends. That is what critics believe Luka still needs to prove. And yet, despite all of those concerns, there is one reason nobody should be ready to give up on Luka. Because Luka's talent is not the problem. It may actually be the reason the Lakers have a championship chance in the first place. We've already seen what happens when Luka has the right environment around him. Dallas reached the NBA Finals with a roster designed around his strengths. And one major ingredient was shooting. During that finals run, the Mavericks ranked 3rd in the NBA in three-pointers made. The Lakers were cited as 23rd.
That difference is enormous. If opponents can collapse the floor because the Lakers don't punish them consistently from three, Luka has fewer driving lanes, fewer passing options, and more defenders waiting for him. And defensively, Los Angeles may need to build a structure similar to what Golden State built around Stephen Curry. Curry didn't have to carry the defense. The Warriors surrounded him with elite defensive talent. That allowed his offensive brilliance to become the deciding factor. The Lakers may need to do the same thing with Luka, but even the perfect roster cannot solve the most important part of this equation, Luka himself. Imagine the biggest game of Luka's career. Game 7. Championship on the line. One possession decides everything. The referee makes a call Luka doesn't like. What happens next? Does Luka spend 5 seconds arguing? Or does he turn around and sprint back? That could sound like a tiny detail. It isn't. Championship teams are built on thousands of tiny details. The extra rotation, the defensive sprint, the smart pass, the controlled emotion, the refusal to let one bad call destroy the next possession. Luka already has the offensive skill to dominate. What he has to prove now is that he can control everything that comes with being the face of a championship team. And that's why the answer isn't simply yes or no. Can Luka Dončić lead the Lakers to a championship? Yes. But can he do it without changing anything? That's the real question. The talent is extraordinary. The numbers are extraordinary. The ceiling may be higher than almost anyone in the league. But the Lakers don't need Luka to simply be spectacular. They need him to become dependable when everything is falling apart. They need fewer turnovers. They need better defensive effort. They need him to stop allowing frustration to take him out of possessions. And they need the right roster around him, especially shooting and defensive protection. Because if Luka fixes those weaknesses, the Lakers don't just have a superstar. They could have a championship monster. But if the same habits remain, then Los Angeles could discover the most painful truth of all. The player capable of carrying their championship dream could also be the reason it collapses.
Yo, mic check 1 to 2, -1, -2. Game over for this video, folks. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to stay in the huddle for more. This is NFL Madness. Bringing the heat and signing out.